If you grew up on the Flash ran internet, some of your fondest memories are probably wanting desperately to eat the Webkinz gems in the curio shop, because don't tell me this isn't the most delicious, scrumptious morsel you've ever seen in your goddamn life, or risking your parents' credit card information for the promise of 1 million Neopoints and a fairy paintbrush. Some of us played on shitty game websites with hand-drawn platformers or downloaded dubious files off of DeviantArt, and others still spent hours chatting with strangers on Club Penguin, only to spend $80 an hour in your 20s talking about it with a therapist in a closed room who has no fucking idea what a puffle is. Whichever way that you played, online games were a huge defining factor for the unsupervised and possibly off-putting child community, aka the kids that grew up in the 2000s. The real meat of these online games, though made as pretty damn obvious cash grabs at the time, was a sense of community, or in other cases creativity and skill development for kids. Unless it was Girls Go Games, which actually gave me the most invaluable lessons that I have ever found on the internet, which are how to lie, steal, and cheat. Listen, there were no free memberships for Girls Go Games, okay? It was every bitch for themselves, and I really respect that, and I wish the times were still that way now. But in most cases, colorful art, minigames, exclusivity via paywalls, and a social network built these websites to be the perfect time suck for kids left alone on the family desktop. I personally took to psychologically torturing other children by convincing them I could turn their Webkinz into special eShop pets if they did whatever little ritual I'd come up with that day, so if anybody ever had that done to you, I'm sorry. I'm sure many of you have been speculating, no, I haven't been arrested for anything yet, and the hate you've been wishing on me hasn't worked. I'm 5'9" and I've won the Neopets poetry competition 3 times, so I think I'm doing pretty well for myself, thank you. I'm also a sucker for nostalgia, as are most people nowadays, considering the amount of off-putting people on my TikTok For You page that pretend they're teenagers for a living, but I feel like that's a completely different conversation. I don't know, listen, do whatever you want, but it gets a little bit weird when you get the pigtails on, I won't lie to you. Anyway, I love visiting old worlds that I have a lot of memories attached to, and I have found more often than not that I can't. The websites that I grew up on and sunk hours of my after-school time into either barely function without a steady user base that's dwindled over time, have been shut down entirely, or received a reboot that makes them look like the Benadryl Hat Man's biological fucking children. Look at this, okay? Look at it straight in the eye and tell me you don't feel the primal sense of fear that kept early men alive. Tell me you don't feel the uncanny valley sinking into your pores and draining you of your life force. If the church genuinely wanted new members, they would pose this as the Antichrist return. You want anti-weed ads to work? Cool, put this as what happens when you smoke too much. This image alone has the power to completely abolish all crime if you just showed it in jails. There's really no in-between with these dysfunctional sites except for Neopets, which is the in-between and lives on with me being the sole source of income for Hassy Bounce and Solitaire. I'm keeping this website alive with my own 2 hands and I refuse to let it die. You may be starting to theorize to yourself that this entire video is an excuse for me to talk about Neopets, and yes, it is. I hope you understand you're strapped down to a chair now and you can't leave. However, even Neopets had their parent company Jumpstart recently defused, including every single one of their other IPs being laid to rest. Neopets was actually sold off to another company, but some other IPs weren't so lucky, like the World of Jumpstart, which apparently people played. I didn't know about that because it scared me the second I looked it up. The death of Flash Player can be linked to most of these issues, sure, which is kind of why I don't want to give it too much of a spotlight here. It's blamed over and over again for the massive damage done to old internet history, and it's a large factor, but often overlooked is the fact that it isn't the only one. I think there's plenty of other issues contributing to the loss of my favorite soul-sucking economy simulators, and I would love it if you'd want to listen to them too. Without further ado, what the fuck is going on here, and why are my moshi monsters dead? First of all, what even makes up a virtual world? Why does it sound like something Elon Musk would make? Virtual worlds is a bit more of a blanket term, but what we're going to be discussing today are massively multiplayer online games, or MMOs. I have no idea why people always leave out the G, but I'm not the wizard here, okay? I'm not the wordsmith. I didn't invent this, I'm just the person who regurgitates Wikipedia articles. MMOs were large-scale online games that were usually playable in browsers in this era rather than downloading them. These games usually featured an open-world playstyle, the ability to talk to other players, and complete quests with other users in real time. Many of the first MMOs started in the 90s and were geared towards adults. These games were massively successful throughout their run and provided a great foundation for the kids games we're about to talk about, and they also provided something to do on the fancy new internet that wasn't download music from LimeWire. God fucking speed, LimeWire, I miss you so much, baby girl, I really do. You know what, Spotify's fine, it really is, it's fine, but there was nothing more satisfying than putting your iPod Nano up to the desktop and suddenly you were a god. Suddenly you had every single one of the Black Parade tracks up there right on your little button pusher. There's no greater bliss. There's genuinely no greater bliss, and I will never be able to replicate it, so. These games also usually had an economy that could be affected by players. This is where most of the minigames came in. You could earn money, you could get new stuff for your pets or your animals or your character, whatever the hell you had. Maybe it was a little flesh pet, you don't know. These websites really started to hit their stride for children in the early 2000s with the invention of Neopets, Pop Tropica, Webkins, Club Penguin, you name it. Kids were a fairly untapped market on the internet at the time because there wasn't very much for them to do. It was something used by adults mostly and for schoolwork at the very least. Unless you were cool and on kid pics, which you know what, thank God somebody was. You needed it, soldier. Children are also far more susceptible to advertising, which we'll get into later. It was a very good idea, and you know what, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker half of the time. I really did. I hate it here. I do. You might remember a couple common themes that were present throughout almost every server, designed to both rake in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the developers and entice kids to join up and sensationalize the website. A lot of the advertising for these early virtual worlds was word of mouth at first. It was a really great advertising tactic to have kids basically say, hey, if you don't join this website right now and put in your mother's email, you're not cool and you're going to be shunned from the rest of the children for your entire life. The common facets used to attract these kids in the first place, in my opinion, are number one, kid-friendly, brightly colored, and brand-friendly characters. Think things that would be marketable for companies like Nickelodeon or Disney and had the bright, attractive colors that usually got me joining things. They needed a distinct, friendly art style so that kids could easily identify them and also have content that was suitable for brands to advertise on and merchandise in the future. Number two, paywalls, usually in a monthly subscription form. These are honestly genius because not only are they making money without advertisers, they are able to entice children to get them by making an air of exclusivity and hierarchy. It is kind of devastating as a child who doesn't understand how money or the economy works to see somebody else have a very cool jacket on their Webkins when you don't. Some of these also implemented premium currencies, which are in-game currencies that you pay real-life money for. These were usually posted on top of a membership fee and might not even be accessible if you don't have a membership, so you're basically paying bill upon bill. Number three, regulated chat and interactions. This usually gave players the ability to talk to other players through a filter or a moderator system. These were usually put in place to avoid profane language, but I honestly have never seen one work very well once in my entire life, so you know what, they can't stop the kids from saying shit with a bunch of symbols. I remember most kids finding these very hard to put up with and hating them and making them feel infantile, but you know what, the parents felt more comfortable with them, so I can understand why they were there, and obviously lawsuits as well. I mean, I'm sure there was one. Last but not least, number four is customization. Possibly being the most enticing part of joining a virtual world is creating and customizing your character, and this is why premium memberships and currencies sold so well. Customization was usually a form of showing your status and also helped you to express yourself if you were one of those kids who thought expressing yourself was fun. Most of these customization features were put behind a paywall or a lot of time spent on the site if they didn't have one so that you could see more of their advertisements. Fun outfits, bright colors, and specialty items were the easiest way to flag down a rich-ass person. Designing the website in a stimulating, character-focused manner was incredibly important for both merchandising the website with toys and other random knickknacks that I desperately wanted as a child to stare at and use for absolutely nothing, as well as making the website appear child-focused enough that parents would feel comfortable leaving their kids to play on it with strangers without feeling any kind of fear. Of course, put a pin in that idea because we're unfortunately going to be talking about it later. Webkins is probably the best example of kid-focused advertising, and I would have genuinely stabbed an elderly person as a young child to get my hands on this son of a bitch. The Arctic wolf plushie. Yeah, I was a wolf child, and you know what? I genuinely would have done any crime. I would have done anything somebody asked me to. I would have gotten in a white van for this thing, I swear to God. Incorporating a physical, tangible plushie not only added a reward for playing on the site where you needed to pass a second paywall to actually get to the juice of the game, but it also legitimized the site for parents. If Gans is able to get their merchandise into actual legitimate stores, it seems a lot less shady and unknown. It was also the worst thing possible for children who would bite one another for Pokemon cards because goddamn, if you see that plushie in a store, they're gonna sit on the rack until they fucking die. Kids are birds, they love to collect. My nest is full of small, freakish pig plushies and I guard them with my life. Speaking of paywalls, they usually replaced advertising or went in tandem with integrated advertising like in Club Penguin, looking at those Disney wigs that even freaked me out in my days of yore. Obviously, these websites needed to make money to keep the doors open. However, often the way that memberships were branded was a bit more complicated than just a way to unlock new features. I remember the hierarchy of sorts that went into having memberships on websites. You were often ignored by other players if you didn't have the little gold badge on your name or you didn't have the perfect pet or the perfect color. Now that we're all older, we can see how weird it sounds from this perspective, but as as kids, we were surrounded by this and thought it was the way to go, thought it was the way to fit in with all the other little freaks. If your character wasn't dripped out in Animal Jam Gucci spiked collars, you might as well have been hanged in the town square for the crime of being poor. And when you're 12, there is nothing worse than being the guy without a hat on. It wasn't classism. It's stupid to call MMORPGs classism, but it was certainly enough to turn me into a historical French bourgeoisie hunter. If they didn't want to breed little communists, they should have shut down memberships immediately, okay? They should have shut them down because I was ready to kill the rich. If you wanted people to be your friend and give you attention, you had to have the little membership thing on your profile or you would be shunned and thrown out like a piece of trash. Regulated chat was often a myth, to be honest with you, but it was the bane of my existence as a child because I thought I was old enough to say the fuck word and I should be allowed to do it as I please. However, these filters didn't work and they were honestly a big problem in terms of child safety. They truly remind me of the Wild West Omegle era of the internet because maybe you were warned against putting your full name in your username, but I recall typing out my home address in the Club Penguin chat box just fine. Human moderators or actual supervision for any of these sites were usually pretty far and few between, and if they were there, they probably didn't catch everybody. These filters didn't disallow any personal information, and that meant I saw a lot of it floating around. I didn't think it was a problem as a child, and those children didn't either. But it was there were massive amounts of identifying information, and it was a huge issue. These elements all came together to create the virtual world boom of the early 2000s. And it was massive. Almost every child I knew in my very small, very violent elementary school was discussing their many achievements and how many memberships they were able to juice out of their mothers by the end of the week. Large companies were even starting to take notice, with Club Penguin being acquired by Disney and Neopets being acquired by Nickelodeon. Some brands were even starting to create their own virtual worlds as advertising, like Build-A-Bear and for some reason American Girl. I don't know. God knows how many hours I spent on these things grinding for points and levels and finishing quests, and with the rising profits and player numbers creating a sense of security for these brands, it seemed like the only way forward was upward. This aforementioned boom began at a time where the internet was still relatively new as a social device of sorts. It had a novelty to it. You could talk to anyone, anywhere, and the sparkly new code of using the internet as a pastime rather than a tool had a way to revive it after the dot-com bubble stock crash in 2000. By the way, if you don't know what the dot-com bubble stock crash was, in fear of sounding like a business major, I don't want to explain it very much, but in the simplest terms possible, it was basically a bunch of investors putting all of their money into the internet because it was new and exciting, and eventually losing it all and making a recession internet-wise. After this happened, people were looking for a way to make the internet profitable again, and advertising toward kids was a fantastic way to do it. There was also a huge focus on real-world child safety at this time. You might remember the satanic panic of the 90s, the fear of drug contamination and dealers living on your street corner, kidnapping and trafficking rings hoarding spots on the news, and the infamous story I was constantly told about heroin needles being implanted into the stuffed animals at Walmart. Because obviously those struggling with addiction were looking to share their stash with a nice little 5-year-old who would get real hopped up on the juice. But I digress. The real world was getting scarier and scarier for parents, and rightfully so. Trying to look out for your child when so much heartbreaking news is being shoved in your face is an impossible task at best and a stifling, suffocating reality at worst. When kids could feasibly be left inside, they were, and the cheapest, easiest way to entertain them was to allow them onto virtual worlds for hours. The internet was just the internet, right? There was no actual implications or anything. Nothing bad could happen in the depths of chat forums because it's just on the computer, and the computer's not real, right? $8 a month was better than your kid walking away with a stranger, and the Webkinz plushies were cute enough. A few dollars was okay to keep your kid happy and safe. With monetization being the biggest driving factor in the heart of every virtual world, TV ads, toys, McDonald's, Happy Meal themes, and other freaky branding tactics allowed the novelty of virtual worlds to take over mainstream media in a huge way. The bubble blew up more and more by the day, with multi-million-dollar profit margins within a few months coming to fruition. Listen, I don't know if you'll believe me here when I say it, but there was actually a time when the market wasn't very saturated, so newcomers could easily get traction on playgrounds and TV shows. In the beginning, user statistics, membership signups, and profit margins were increasing by the year, climbing up more and more as time went on. But over time, they would come to a stagnation and then eventually a drop-off for most websites in the late 2010s. The early 2000s to the 2010s may seem like a reasonable amount of time for trends to die off, and it honestly is. Losing popularity over 10 or so years is a completely normal way to go, especially in a gradual decline. Trends fade away, old ideas become obsolete and fade out, and they're replaced with something new. It's a life cycle of trends, it's the life cycle of news, it's the life cycle of everything. However, for a lot of these virtual worlds, they remained very healthy in their membership and user base until a sudden dip or a slow decline after many, many years of great, perfect revenue. Maybe 2016, 2015, 2014 were great, but in 2017 you see a bit of a dip. Now 2018, you're seeing almost no new players, you're losing all of your profit. Soon you're down to a margin where you either have to rebrand and take a leap of faith or shut down the website and cut your losses. Most of these deaths happened near 2020. Moshi Monsters shut down, Club Penguin shut down a few years prior. Animal Jam rebooted around this time. Webkins sacrificed their soul to Satan around this time. There was no huge crash, no bursting bubble, just a sad deflation after each fiscal year went by and showed no more signs of growth. Companies that may have been doing okay weren't doing enough, and continuous improvement was the basis to keep these sorts of websites going. Constant updates brought players back. They started with a huge bang of popularity, but they went out with a whimper, and if they didn't, perhaps Flash ended them with a quick gunshot. The thing I see most people ignore when discussing the situation regarding Flash Player going down is the fact that if these websites were still profitable enough that they were growing steadily, the company would be likely to try and convert the game into a different engine besides Flash, enabling them to continue their revenue stream and keep their presence in the market. Flash wasn't the killer for a lot of these sites, it was the euthanasia. It was an act of mercy for the company to put the website down at the end of Flash rather than pour more money into it. Why would you risk converting your entire game into a new engine if it wasn't going to make you any more money and in fact would probably put you into debt? Moshi Monsters had to get a bailout at the end of their lifespan. If they didn't have to do all that much to upkeep it, maybe the server costs were okay to stomach and they were making enough money to at least break even on it, but all of the development and the time it would take to convert it would be making them lose money. Let's say that Flash never went down. You're sipping a nice pina colada on the beach, everything's going smoothly, it's 2023 and you can still go on Girls Go Games with no issues. This may have bought these games a couple more years at best, but if the trends continued the way they were going, they would continue to lose profit until they couldn't run the servers any longer. Flash staying alive was life support for these games. It was able to keep them running on an engine that they didn't have to update or do anything to, but it was only life support. Eventually the rest of the body would also give out. All that to say, if these websites died, they were already dying before Flash came along. See, the internet began its transition from what we knew it as in the early stages to what we know it as now with the birth of YouTube, in my opinion. YouTube provided an entertainment source that was free, crowdsourced, and accessible for everyone without the need of expertise or knowledge. It was a way to communicate with others, at least in the beginning, with video responses and comments being the real lifeblood of the site at its conception. It hadn't turned into this corporate thing where you could make money off of it yet, it was more watch your friends do some stupid shit for views. This, in tandem with new social media websites coming out like DeviantArt, MySpace, and eventually Facebook, created non-niche spaces for people to connect in, and unfortunately, just like the news of new virtual worlds spread throughout schoolyards, so did a cool new website called YouTube. Just to clarify, I am in no way saying YouTube is a bad thing here. I love it, I love watching shit, and I love wilting away in the comfort of my home watching people explain their interests in depth for hours and hours to some royalty-free music. I love the creativity, the fun, and the passion on YouTube. It's truly a unique space that we hadn't seen before, and it really revolutionized the internet. However, it's not and never was for children, and by the time that was realized, it was way too late. I started making YouTube videos in 2009. No, you can't find them anywhere, don't try. They're not there, I deleted them all, you clown. I had 50 subscribers, okay? They're not archived, you can't find them. I had a really incredible time making them. They opened my eyes to what I enjoyed doing as hobbies, helped me to find a voice for myself, and just gave me something to do. And as you can see, I didn't really ever stop. I'm still here, you can't get rid of me. It's unfortunate, isn't it? I should have learned. I really should have learned. I had no success, and I still have only a very minuscule amount of success, but I have it now, and that's enough to keep me going. My best friends all had YouTube channels. They made animated videos and showed off their stories and art because it was the Sparkle Dog era. What else were you gonna do? It was exciting, new, and it gave us a chance to express ourselves from our standpoint. We watched people who made content that wasn't even near appropriate for us because we thought they were cool and different and things we hadn't seen before. It was new, interesting, and against the rules, and it was fun. We talked to other fans in the comments, we learned things, and suddenly, within the span of a couple years, we were too old for chat filters and cute animals and online games. Quick trigger warning here for the discussion of grooming. I won't go into any detail or trauma dump on you, I'll just be explaining how this contributed to the topic at hand and breaking down the epidemic a little bit. If this isn't something that would be healthy for you to watch, please skip to this timestamp. Don't force yourself here to relive something you don't want to live. This is for entertainment purposes and educational purposes only, so you can just go ahead and skip it. With the invention of so many sites advertised as kid-friendly safe havens, the attitude around the internet was a lot more relaxed for young children, and no watchful eye was placed on them any longer. If they had been playing that stupid fucking jam game on Webkinz that I loved more than anything on this sick earth for months on end, why would they move on? And even if they did, where would they be going? What possible danger could even be found through a screen if there were no tangible ways to get through to them? I do not blame anyone in the slightest for not understanding the danger of things like YouTube. In fact, at that time, I believe nobody even understood that the internet could translate into real life in the way that it did. It was new, unheard of, and shiny, and the terminology we use now for things like this didn't really exist then. Basically, it was someone walking around through a football field like a hot dog vendor saying, "Predators, come get your kids, fresh kids here." The second we moved on to other social websites, be it chat rooms or YouTube or Omegle, the urge to blend in and befriend and talk to adults was very prominent. The ability to feel like you're being respected and not silenced, to fit in with people who were usually listened to, and have someone hear you and understand you. Adults who were willing to talk to you on the internet were very easy methods of getting validation. There wasn't a need to be childish or immature. Your new job was to grow up as fast as possible and leave behind anything that suggested otherwise. There were other, better places. The younger, dumber kids could stay on Club Penguin. You would move on and talk to the adults. This shift was seen almost everywhere under the sun, and not just with online games. It wasn't cool to be a kid anymore, and that still hasn't come back around. You move on from YouTube to TikTok now, I guess, maybe Twitch in between. This was a life ruiner for so many children, and something that it takes so long to heal from, and for anybody who was able to meet people on websites and get hurt by them, I am so sorry. If you are an adult on the internet, if you are somebody working on chat sites and working on different social medias, and you come in contact with a child, it is your job as the adult to be the better person. It is your job to keep that child safe if their parents are not doing so, okay? We can all work together, we can all make things better, but we have to work on it and we have to talk about it. Kids now don't deserve to go through what we went through as children, and we can fix it. Dwindling numbers of players could be due to this, the novelty wearing off, or the absence of extra money to spend on memberships and premium currency. I'm not an expert in any of this, I do not have a degree, and I don't speak for every child, but there's no doubt about the changing times and social norms and pressure to grow up. Some companies choose to pull the plug on their games, laying them to rest for a sweet good night and all the memories made on them with it. So many sites are lost to time due to the death of Flash Player because there wasn't a good way to preserve them and there's no way to get them back. A few sites have had rewritten versions, although not with their issues. Looking at the Club Penguin FBI thing, what was that? But that's about it in terms of preservation and archiving, and it took skilled people to make them. But what about the ones that didn't, and why are they so fucking scary? In addition to Webkinz, I went on Animal Jam again a few years ago just to see what was happening with the old girl and see if they had integrated any kind of value system or stock trading for those fucking collars. No dice for the second one, but my god did I find something I didn't want to see. The formerly stylized, cute National Geographic art style had been turned into, this, and the models of the sweet hand-drawn looking animals turned into these shits made in Blender by a nicotine-addicted intern bouncing her boss's small vicious dog in her lap. Godspeed, you poor bitch, truly. Oh my god, look at them. They're so horrifying. Not only was this an awful surprise, but it was far worse to find out that this had been implemented into so many games that I once loved. Why would you do this to them? Huh? What is this? What is this? This is sick. This is human torture, okay? What is this? As an onlooker who's past my online kids game prime, I was deeply confused at all of these rebrands, because what corporate fuck thought that these would be more attractive to children? Who's buying this? Who wants this thing to look at them at night? I would in no way ever let this thing sit in my room with bulging eyes waiting to attack me. If you remember from earlier, internet games were seen as a novelty at their peak. They were new, exciting, and changed the way that the internet was viewed. When you take a new innovation and push it out to the public, they'll cling on to it a lot better than something that they've seen repeated over and over again. I can't be sure, but I think that this was an awful attempt at creating something new and exciting with 3D animation. Games on newer console systems tend to employ this style, and it's become the norm except for nostalgia-style games or pixel art. It shows the capability and the new technology of the console that it's on, and I can see why that would be enticing for companies. However, when you make a model and game in 20 days on the thinnest budget you can muster with people who don't know anything about design, coupled with the fact that it needs to work on a massive massive scale in a browser or a computer download makes it turn into Five Nights at Freddy's Beanie Baby edition. This isn't new information, of course, and everybody knows that the 3D modeling is kind of a thing that everybody's going for now. However, it's just horribly implemented and not right for any of these browser games. The design might seem techy and fun to all the corporate fucks who don't have to play it, but to those who do and grew up with the original game, it's a nightmare. Players who go back to it looking for a shot of nostalgia are instead met with the devil himself. Parents are also now more aware and intuitive of advertising and hidden marketing, and for some reason, I see that discussed the most among reasons why people don't want their children in spaces like these. If you remember the COPPA YouTube thing way back in the day, everybody was making a large stink about their children being advertised to when that wasn't the problem. Plus, when you remove that ability to make money through advertising, you end up getting even more shady advertising. But I digress. It's your choice with your child what you want them to see and what you want them to consume, and I will say that I never want to see a Disney Club Penguin collab again. I mean, seriously, that haunts me. That really haunts me. What was that? There's also been a very large shift in game culture in general. More people who play games tend to go for those console games and downloadable one-time purchase models rather than paying a monthly fee. Nobody really wants to pay $8 a month for something that they will never get to own. It's like leasing a car, but not really at all. Many of these games have online play now too, and it's less of a monotonous, expensive experience. It's no longer a new technology to be able to hang out and converse with people in a game setting, and the style of games that don't have that replayability have become less and less popular. As new technology comes out and new trends take over, old ideas die out over time. A lot of these newer games also don't have filters or age restrictions, which makes them a lot more attractive to the same crowd of kids I discussed earlier, and it also makes them a lot more dangerous. There's free entertainment on YouTube for kids, though almost all of it is uncomfortable and inappropriate, so why pay for them to go on a virtual world? On the other side of the coin, as a child, why do something childish when you could fit in with the others? Why look for friends in a virtual world when you could find them somewhere else without any restrictions? Nostalgia marketing, however, really confused me for a moment because it's baffling to me that none of these sites have re-emerged from the dead to give those who played them as kids a chance to relive that memory. Nostalgia marketing is present fucking everywhere, even in tampon ads now. It's a way to capture you in, and with those who originally inhabited these virtual worlds being old enough to fondly remember their days in the pizza parlor role-playing with a penguin named Cheeseboy47, why wouldn't you bank on that? I then realized I'm an idiot, and there's a very obvious answer for that. There's nothing to do. You could run around the site for maybe an hour, gawking at all the old images and scenery and laughing about all the bullshit that you used to say, but that wouldn't make you buy a membership. It wouldn't make you watch ads for extra coins or pay $5 for premium pets and clothes. It would be a 10-minute walk through memory lane, the site would make no money off of you, and that would be that. I also want to quickly discuss the foray into the mobile market, and I say quickly because there's really not much to say because all of them failed. In the early 2010s, again, mobile apps were getting a huge surge of profitability due to the fact that Apple had made phones that could have them now. Flappy Bird, Cut the Rope, Doodle Jump, Subway Surfers, Talking Angela, and all the rest of those motherfuckers all made a ton of money very fast and intrigued all of the developers of these browser games to go into the app market. These games all have a lot in common. They were usually single-player games, didn't require internet, or if they did, it was only for purchases. They were super repetitive, easy for anybody who didn't really know anything about games to pick up and play in line for Starbucks. What these developers neglected to think about when they were trying to transition into mobile apps was the fact that they don't work very well in a mobile setting, and the reason that these apps had all gotten very popular were because they were easy to pick up and put down. An infamous example of this thought pattern was Club Penguin Island, which lasted for like 2 weeks and was fucking shitty. Plain and simple, the games they were trying to create on the phone were not good for a mobile market, and they were sinking more and more money into them, putting their brands deeper into the ground. Virtual worlds just aren't what they used to be, and they couldn't be in any case. The changes we've come up to in technology, our culture, and the way kids grow up, and the overwhelming need for monetization that can't really come to fruition keeps them in the bay of fond memories and therapy appointments. They had a fantastic, wonderful lifespan for a long time, and they helped many of us waste time as we grew, and they introduced me to social hierarchies at the age of 10. They had a purpose for the generation that they lived in, and though I'd love to see new ones pop up, I don't think they ever will. However, they've evolved, and games like Minecraft, Animal Crossing, and Among Us, is that still a thing? Can I say that? Is that a thing I can say and be like normal? Anyway, they filled the niche of connection that virtual worlds left open. However, there is one virtual world that I can pointedly say did survive, living past both the Flash Purge and the changing times. and I unfortunately am going to talk about it whether you like it or not. Neopets, founded in the 90s, was originally created as a virtual pet site for college students to pass time on and the developers to make a bit of money off of. See, I told you this was a way for me to talk about Neopets. Yeah, you didn't believe me? If you didn't know, Neopets sees you adopt and customize a pet, earn riches, play games, trade, and get into catfights with other users. Virtual pet sites were always hits, but Neopets had some sparkle to it that allowed it to stay alive to the point where I currently play it every day, even after only trying it out for the first time last year. So how the hell did it do this? First of all, Neo stood out with the intricacy of its gameplay. You were not brought into a society of goodwill, no, you had to earn your place through hard work. See, this one was breeding capitalists. Inflation was a constant threat since shops are owned by users and supply and demand creates fluctuation in item prices. You can acquire and sell stocks, which might drop or rise in price depending on the day. You earned interest on the money that you made in the Neopian bank. You had the ability to choose how you made your money, and with so many options, the gameplay was not as repetitive and simple as other worlds. This intricate style kept players coming back into adulthood, and over time, these adults became the site's main population despite the marketing toward children which it's most known for. It's an entire world, and it's now inhabited by people old enough to strategize, discuss, and enjoy it like it's fucking D&D or something, okay? This is a community. This site also maintained a social space for these players, creating a trading economy that changes in the blink of an eye and keeps the users focused and willing to come back and reach their goals of fancy pets. The NC Mall, which provides the ability to buy premium items, kept the site running due to the immense focus on pet customization. Once you acquire your dream pet, you have to give her a sick-ass mane, too. Even with the Flash purge, the non-Flash game elements were enough to keep players coming back. The lack of children on the site ended up making a user base with an income that can be used on Neocash, and no incentive to leave the site to fit in with peers. It withstood its original purpose and became something new. The demographical evolution, while keeping a lot of the same simplistic concepts, I believe is what kept it alive. It was a good game to begin with, but now it has a place for people who don't really have a space like this online, and it's able to make it fresh and fun and update it constantly. I will always miss the days of the early internet, no matter how much I look at it through the lens of memories. Omegle should be illegal though, like genuinely, what the fuck, I can't believe that was ever allowed. Virtual worlds earned their spot in internet history. They earned a spot in our childhoods, and they made us spend a lot of our parents' money, and that's great. I love it. I think it was a great idea. Either way, I will miss them dearly, and as a big fan of them and as a big hater of Flash for shutting down their stupid fucking engine, I would like to say, stop giving them all the flack. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you made it all the way through, you're a fucking saint. I know this isn't Animal Crossing, but I really wanted to give something else a shot, and video essays are something that I love doing, so hopefully this was okay. Let me know what virtual worlds you played in as a child and how you found this video. What do you think? What are your theories? As always, thank you so much to all of my members. You're the best, you're wonderful people, and I appreciate you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, my friends, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Add me on Neopets. My username is Salem Ophelia. Hee hee.